All right, so are we going to do both episodes or
Yeah, sure. So, right. So we have what was the first one called? The
another path?
Other Path, and then
Uh,
the one after that was what was it called?
Alice in Disco Land?
Disco Land. Oh yes. Oh, I love that one. I mean, for all of the as luck would have it bits in there, it's a good episode, and of course the Lonely Man disco theme really just makes it for you, you know.
Well, and actually, the episode before that, I don't know if you remember, but another path, there was actually a jazz version of
Oh
The Lonely Man.
yes,
Right.
because they
Uh,
discussed jazz, Dizzy Gillespie.
all right, so let us get started on the episode we want to talk about. So let me get that screen up.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered Gamma Cast.
Hello, this is Gamma Cast. Today we are going to be talking about episode 6, season 2 of The Incredible Hulk, called Another Path. The synopsis of this one: while stowing away in the back of a truck, David meets a blind Chinese philosopher who offers him the chance to cure his affliction using Chinese meditation techniques. David follows Lee Sung back to San Francisco, only to become inadvertently involved in a battle against a rival in Lee Sung's community. Director Joseph Pevney. Writer is Nicholas Correa. Original air date October 27th, 1978. Alias is David Bramer. And location is San Francisco, California. I am Dave. Online I have got Charlie.
Hello.
So we are ready to talk Another Path.
Mhm.
Now, Charlie, you're a big Marvel fan. Now, did Lee Sung remind you of Stick
Yes.
from Daredevil
Lee
fame?
Sung very much. Well, no. No. Yeah. So let me backtrack. Lee Sung, because Stick was not a quiet, peaceful philosopher. He was a violent fascist, you know, a borderline sociopath. Uh, for his goal of truth, justice, and defeating the Hand. But yeah. He is much more in line with the I'm blinking on the name of that character from Kung Fu, the old blind master in Kung Fu. The
Oh,
blind master, of course, is a common trope of Kung Fu cinema, um, and always welcome here. It was a very good episode, I have to say. Despite the truck driver's urge to murder hobos.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, well, again, we've said this before that everyone's like first option in sorting out our problems as well. Have we tried murdering them? It is the 1978 equivalent of turning it on and off again. Is there a problem? Have we tried murdering them? Well, let's
Right.
try that. Let's see how that goes.
So right, to your point,
Now,
the episode starts, it's raining, David sees a truck that's parked, he wants a ride. The trucker doesn't want to give him a ride, but it's raining so hard, he wants to find shelter. The back of the truck is open, so David decides that he's going to go into the truck and, try to hitch a ride without officially getting a permission. Truck driver sees him going into the back of the truck. He slams the door shut, turns on the freezing
yeah, the
element, or the
reaper.
refrigerator element, and at that time, tries to turn David into a popsicle. And at that time, that's when David discovers that the Oriental man Lee Sung is into the back of the truck also, but he's doing meditation. And David, in order to try to help this elderly man, takes off his jacket, and at that time, now he's getting extremely cold, and it's getting dangerous. And then that's when we get almost immediately a Hulk out moment that causes David to have to bust out of the truck, saving the old man and himself. So that's how we start, which is kind of which is a really fun way to start, and it's very quick to get to the first Hulk out. So I did appreciate that part of the episode.
Yeah, well, no, it was like I said, it was very interesting. It was a good way to get to the Hulk out. Our Eastern mysticism here is always, it's one of these things that's always a little touchy. Although, again, it's an interesting thing, especially when we look at something like Rainbow's End, where they'll have, and of course, we've mentioned, from Marriage, that this show is not above 1970s racial comedy when it wants to. It is not above playing some stereotypes. But to their credit, when they have, what I'll say is that they do have the actors of color address these racial disparities, even though they do address them from a perspective of, you're not going to have the Black Panthers in this show, but you do have people acknowledge that their ill treatment by the dominant culture is not appreciated, and then you show how often these people will utilize those assumptions by the dominant culture. In this case, the guy talking about being the senile old Asian man. How they utilize those presumptions of culture to their advantage.
Now, I like the way that they blended in the vibe of Kung Fu or Enter the Dragon. So I like all that aspects of it. What I don't like is, the use of kind of the trope with the ancient Chinese proverbs. To me, I think that gets overdone in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And so that part I didn't like of it, but everything else I liked around the, all the great elements of that culture, being the Kung Fu moments, and, like I said, a big feel of Enter the Dragon. That's what it really felt like to me, some portions of this episode. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, of course, with the tropiness of it, I mean, it's important to remember that these tropes don't spring fully formed from the head of Zeus. That there is a language of film and culture that speaks with these tropes, including in Asian cinema itself, which of course is highly influential.
Right.
Now, of course, what you do have in this again, which is sort of an American trope, a Western trope, which is the idea of the Eastern philosophy corrupted by the Western mindset. Because of course our antagonist in this is a former student of Sung, who has taken the principles of meditation and overemphasize the martial arts aspect of them, both for profit and to build his own little budding criminal empire.
Right. Right. So you're talking about Frank Silva, the Frank Silva character, and you're right. That leads us right into kind of the next portion of the episode after David starts traveling with Lee Sung, and Lee Sung is teaching David meditation in order to help him curb the moments where he's enraged and becomes the Hulk. So in a way, this blends into another flavor of David trying to cure his predicament.
Yes, which I thought was very nice.
Right.
Yeah, and which I thought was very nice, and also grows off of what we saw in Marriage. marriage, which was of course based on the idea of biofeedback and creating this post-hypnotic or this hypnotic state in which he could confront his rage. And again, of course, meditation is a much more it's the same process. It's a less scientific, but essentially the same process as that biofeedback that that was first observed in marriage.
Right, and we even had a few cutscenes from Married that were
Mm-hmm.
bled into this
Oh,
episode, which
married.
is which is really cool. So Lee Sung and David travel together to get back to San Francisco, and they discover that they both like jazz, so they have a nice bonding moment over their love of music.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they get back to San Francisco, then they start to discover that people are afraid of Lee Sung, and his old school is no longer where it used to be, and there's a new high-rise building that, as you were mentioning, his former student Frank Silva is now in charge of this and has made it to a bigger establishment, more successful, by corrupting the teachings of Lee
Mm-hmm.
Sung to more of the kung fu element. And this is where we get more of into the Cobra Kai, Karate
Yes.
Kid type of moment versus
Mm-hmm.
versus what we had with Enter the Dragon at that point. But
Yes.
so we have
Which again, to go into that classic '80s idea, you have this idea of a pure Eastern which in its own way is racistically reductive. The idea of the pure Eastern philosophy, which is then corrupted by the Western by Western greed, as it were. That you move away from the purity of karate, as it were, and or kung fu in this case, and you move towards just the physical supremacy of the martial arts, using that as your only testament in this very Randy and Ubermensch idea of those with power take because it is their right as those with power.
Now, there's one thing that I did note with this episode is Frank Silva, the guy that played him, actor Tom Holland. I'm not giving him any bad flack for the episode, but I'm just saying that, much like Lonnie Anderson, was not believable at all as a kung fu master.
Yeah, and I'd say maybe he was slightly more believable.
He was more believable, but I mean, it just.
Well, that here's what I'm going to say. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it speaks to this this question of whether or not the producers just had a lack of faith in Lou Ferrigno, the skills to do complex fight choreography. Because again, this is a situation where we could have had a really interesting Hulk fight between the Kung Fu masters and the Hulk. That would have been very interesting. And again, we completely avoid that. We completely circumvent that. We don't get a real Kung Fu master Hulk fight. We just have the Hulk. Which is
I gotta disagree with one point though. One point though that was funny was the guy that had the big bow staff, and the Hulk grabbed him and pinned him up against the ceiling with the bow staff.
Yeah,
that was funny.
Oh yes, no, it was funny. It was good. It just it didn't utilize the I think to some extent that we have a bit of the cinematic influence of, and this of course is you go into these things where there's a visual language that exists in this time period that does not exist today. And this was actually a very interesting thing. Years ago they were discussing I was a big fan of Deep Space Nine, and they have an episode where, of course, as often happens in Star Trek, they go back in time and they go to the Trouble with Tribbles episode of Star Trek, and O'Brien and Bashir, and I was watching behind the scenes about, and they're discussing about how the fighting style is so different that now that in a modern TV show, you do much more karate chops and things of that nature, whereas in this point, you do these big wide punches, which was just a completely different way of cinematically choreographing a fight. And so I think that in this case we're getting very much this idea that when you're dealing with a superhuman character, you slow everything down. You don't show the strength of the Hulk. You just have him move slowly, and that gives the sense of power to the Hulk. But of course, it makes your fight choreography very difficult to do. Whereas nowadays, you'd actually invest a little more in your fight choreography to make the Hulk seem much more active. And of course, the fact that they were using grease paint and not a more acrylic paint on the Hulk, limited them too, because of course every time Ferrigno's bumping into something, he's rubbing paint off himself. So, I mean, the difficulties of the time limit our ability to it, but every time you see it and that there's something they could have done there that they just don't, it's always a little disappointing. But yeah, when the Hulk does fight the Kung Fu guys and he does dispatch them in some interesting ways, it is fun to watch. But you know what? I guess what's bothersome is that how dominant the Hulk is in that, rather than showing what is a really interesting thing in a Hulk fight, is that when he does face martial artists, this is going back to the comics, that a Hulk facing a martial artist often does find himself at a disadvantage because they're not looking to overpower him, they're looking to use his strength against him.
Right.
And so that of course is the disappointment here, but it's a minor disappointment, I'll be honest with you, because in general I found it to be a very good and strong episode for what it was. It's always the thing with a show like this, that you do have to remember that this is taking place in a space and a time that is different than we are familiar with. But if you can divorce yourself from those feelings of, oh, we do it so much better today, this is very much, as I've said, the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it is still just the start, and it is still feeling itself from that late 70s mode of storytelling from which it is birthed. If they did this show today, it would be a much different show and a much better show. But I still think that if you think about it in terms of what it was then, it's still a really strong show. And this I thought was a very good episode.
Yeah, and I think to the point that you've made in previous episodes or previous podcasts is, if you look at it as a time capsule, this fits right into that, because it really bled into the what was big in popular culture at the time, which was the late 70s, and you had the shows like Kung Fu going on, and you had the rise of the martial artists like the Bruce Lees that were very popular at the time, and and so this picked up on that and was able to carry it forward in a dramatic episodic TV show, for primetime viewing, and
Yeah.
so looking at it, as a time capsule piece, then yes, for its time period, you're right. It very well done, and you're right. It would be much different in a modern day take if you were to look at this. If the Incredible Hulk was in the Arrow universe or the Flash universe, I mean, it would be much different. And would they have a ninja episode? Who knows? But I'm sure it would be very cool to see. But I want to back up to another one other.
Ninja episode.
What was that?
So I think we can pretty much guarantee there would be a ninja episode. Ninjas are always cool.
Yeah, but I want to back up to before the what led up to the second Hulk out, which we already described the aftermath. But what happened was that Lee Sung did this nerve pinch thing that put David to sleep, and they ended up tying him to the bed because they knew that he was going to be insistent on wanting to help Lee Sung fix the Frank Silva situation. The part that I thought was fun to watch was when he wakes up and realizes he's tied to the bed. The person that's watching him is the grandma of a character that tried to kill him earlier, May. And the grandma was just hilarious because she first wants to give him some tea. He, of course, is upset because he wants to go help Lee Sung. He wants to get out of the bed. And, you had this exchange that once he hulked out and then ripped himself free of the bed, where she was attacking the Hulk, beating him, with like a fan or something like that. And I just thought that was hilarious. Before he, looks at her with a displeasing no look and then leaves. But it was, it was a funny Lou Ferrigno moment, and I just wanted to give that credit.
No, and it was I love that scene, and I did like Lou Ferrigno's and it's a very interesting thing they do with the Hulk sometime, where he goes to the window, doesn't smash through the wall, he goes to the window, he shows some level of self-awareness, and to the extent of May, I don't know about anybody else, but I know that I was watching this, and it is totally my headcanon that somewhere in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that May somehow is going to tie back to Melinda May of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That somehow there is this family lineage that we're seeing here, and that I think that would be awesome. But yeah, I mean, it is, that was a great scene. And again, goes to this basic idea. It's an interesting thing with David Banner and his hulking out, because there does not seem to be any real consistency to it. It seems like, what's going to cause him to hulk out? It can be extreme physical pain. It can be emotional agitation. But then you'll have another time where something really traumatic happens to him and he doesn't hulk out. Like when he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out and he doesn't hulk out. And that's, I find that interesting. I don't know if there's anything more to it beyond just it helps the story. But I do find it interesting, that inconsistency in what causes a hulk out.
Right. It does seem to be very inconsistent. You're right. That you never know when or, I mean, when you're in the midst of the episode, you kind of know that that's going to be the, kind of, the situation that's going to cause it, because the story is leading it that way. So that part, but yeah, you're right. There are those moments where you're like, well, normally we would have gotten a Hulk moment there, but we didn't. So, to get us to the end of the episode, they have that moment. The Hulk has the situation where he helps save Lee Sung. They're able to get the Frank Silva character knocked out, and enough that they're able to hand him over to the police. And then, at that point, David decides that it's time that, he's got, after he becomes David again, he decides that, I've overstayed my welcome. Now it's time to go. So the only thing the episode was really missing was a in-person appearance of Jack McGee, even though we did get the knowing that he was on his way, because he had contacted Lee Sung on the phone, according to what Lee Sung was telling David at the end. Of course, having David stay just long enough so they can listen to some jazz again.
Yeah, which I thought was, it's interesting just to have both. It's interesting on a couple levels. First off, that after the first Hulk out, Jack McGee isn't already trying to get there, which is, now, of course, I don't know where the Hulk out occurs, but they actually stated that Jack McGee was flying in from Miami. So I guess that trucker did not report the Hulk to his insurance agent. Maybe he thinks he can make the repairs himself and save some money. Um, but it is problematic for me a bit that Jack McGee is so sidelined in it. But that we do get that when Jack McGee finally does show up, it's like, oh, he's on the plane from Miami, and so of course it is just enough time for David and Sung to go to a jazz club to listen to some music, which is, it's nice. It's nice to have the music and all that, but at the same time, it does seem a bit contrived. I'm not going to say that I was sitting there saying, "Oh, that ruined the episode for me," because it didn't. But you do realize, like, that I do feel like sometimes in this show that they have Jack McGee as a character, but they don't know what to do with him. That they paid Jack Coulson to be in this, and they've obviously got him under some kind of contract, but then they don't have anything to do with the character that they have him, on that pay or play contract for. And it has to be pay or play because they keep on bringing him back. He's in the title sequence. He's probably being paid as much as either Bill Bixby or Lou Ferrigno every episode, even though he's not in every episode. So it's an interesting thing,
Right. In this case, it was just the mention of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, what's he doing in Miami? Because the last place, or the episode before, David was in Lincoln, Nebraska. So why is Jack hanging out in Miami? Did something happen in Miami that we didn't get to see? So that goes into this whole McGee file comic book concept that we talked about. So that's what I want to find out now. It's like, what was going on in Miami that had Jack out there?
I think the National Register is based in Miami. I know that the National Enquirer was based in Miami for a while, so that's what I'm basing that off of. So that's why I think that he is. I think that's why he was in Miami, because he had gotten called back to the office.
Don't ruin it for me, Charlie. He was out there because there was something going on with Hulk related.
Yeah, well, because there were reports of the Man Thing in the Everglades, and so he went to investigate the Man Thing, and but as it turned out, it was just Brother Voodoo and the Man Thing, and they wiped his memory of it, with a mystical spell.
There you go. That's better.
There we go. Honestly, because Brother Voodoo is a 1970s character, although we do get a Voodoo episode, so who knows? Maybe we'll get Brother Voodoo yet. We'll see. Or some character that we can just headcanon to say that was really Brother Voodoo in that background scene.
Well, I was going DC universe anyway, because at Florida, I think crocodiles, Killer Croc. So, but I know that that's crossing the streams there. So,
yeah. Well, and also Killer Croc isn't based out of Florida. He's based out of Gotham.
Well, of course.
Which is New Jersey, man. Gotham, New Jersey.
All right. So, is there anything
officially
else?
Now, since they made that last movie, because they show that Metropolis is across the river from Gotham. So that means Gotham is Jersey and Metropolis is New York City. So Batman is the defender of Newark.
So, do you have any additional thoughts on A New Path? Or another path? Sorry, not. Yeah,
another path. I thought it was I thought it was a good exploration of, I think this had, in its own roundabout way, kind of everything that you kind of want from the Hulk. It is, Banner's looking for a cure, even though he's not actively seeking the cure when he comes across this. There is this quest to find a way to control the beast. There is a violent confrontation that does require a Hulk, in fighting off these martial arts students. And, the only downside is an active lack of Jack McGee, though we do get him at the end. And of course, you get the jazz infused Lonely Man theme, which we get at the end there. So
Yeah, I agree with all those points because as we talked about in the previous episode, I've got to get rid of the thought process of we don't need the episodic drama that we're in. We don't necessarily need to have a superhero type moment in order for it to be enjoyable. Going into the episodes now with that thought process and just knowing that I'm going to get a dramatic TV show and just enjoy the ride. In this case, I actually did get some stuff that was worthy of a superhero because you had the band of ninja-like people that had to be beat. So I thought that part was really kind of cool. As far as him trying to cure himself by using the teachings of meditation, I thought that was another cool aspect. So I love that. You're right about the Jack McGee thing. We didn't have him in person, just mention of him, and that was kind of a negative aspect of the episode. But everything else with the episode, I'm a fan. I enjoyed it. So it's really a fun episode. Once again, the jazz infused Lonely Man, that right there is really cool too. And hats off to Grandma Lou for attacking the Incredible Hulk with a fan. Very fun episode.
Absolutely. So do you want my social media?
I do want your social media. Go for it.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen who like our podcast, if you'd like to tweet along with me as I live tweet episodes of The Incredible Hulk on MeTV Saturdays at 7 Eastern, you can do so at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEssser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And if you'd like to write to me and Dave, much in the way that our new pal Tristan just wrote to us this week, feel free to write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. Those 2 T's are next to each other.
All right, so I'm Dave. I take care of our 80s Reboot social media accounts. On Facebook, we're at facebook.com/80sreboot. Tumblr is 80sreboot.tumblr.com. We have a blog that's at southgatemediagroup.com/80srebootblog. Twitter is at 80sreboot. And we have that email. It's at 80sreboot@gmail.com. We definitely want to hear your feedback on our episodes. So please do write to us or tweet to us. We'll even read those on the episodes also. So that's definitely a lot of great ways to get a hold of Charlie or myself, and I'd highly recommend you take advantage of that. Let us know what you think. Another great way to give us feedback is, of course, that rating review on iTunes. So if you get a chance, please do that for us. We'd appreciate it. Hopefully you want to give us 5 stars. But, if there's, if you're just mad at us and we're just getting all the episodes wrong, feel free to put that comment in there too. I'd love to be able to address that. I'm wondering, Charlie, are there any other podcasts that are out there that you listen to that you want to give a shout out to?
Oh, well, within the Southgate Media podcast universe, I'm always a big fan of There Are Four Lights, the Star Trek podcast. And of course, I love World's Finest with Philip Parrish and Lilith Hellfire, who do a weekly wrap-up of the DC Comics of the Week. Of course, Philip and I do the Marvel Comics on our show, and then again on Super Connectivity. And there's a lot of great podcasts out there. Wait What is a great podcast on comics and pop culture if you're ever interested. And there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, and the other one that came to mind as you were talking was co-host Jesse. He does a podcast called Set Listing Bruce, and it's based on being a fan of Bruce Springsteen, but he also does a lot of other episodes where he's talking with fans of other musical bands and singers, songwriters. So he covers the whole gambit of music on that. So if you get a chance, check out Set Lusting Bruce. I also know that he's been nominated for the podcast awards for that podcast. So if you get a chance, go to the podcastawards.com, I believe the address is, and vote in the music category for Set Lusting Bruce.
Mm-hmm. Good to know.
Yep. All right. So with that, we appreciate everybody hulking out with us, and have a good night.
Have a great night.
We'll return after these messages. The Incredible Hulk. This man is searching for the cure to a raging force dwelling within him. Bill Bixby as Dr. David Banner. Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk. Together, a powerful combination for justice.
The Incredible Hulk, today at 9 on Channel 46.
All right, so this is our Gamma Cast email mailbox, for lack of a better name of calling it, but this is our first fan email. It's from listener Tristan Lofting. Tristan Lofting is actually somebody that's been a regular Twitter engager of 80s Reboot. So it's something that Tristan has been involved in kind of 80s Reboot for actually quite a while. So I'm very cool to get kind of a long form response from Tristan that is more than just longer than a regular tweet. So this is really kind of cool for me. However,
this is awesome. I just want to say my youngest son's name is Tristan. So
oh, very cool.
That's kismet right there.
All right. But unfortunately, Tristan's got some commentary regarding our last episode on some things that we may have missed. So what I want to do is I want to read the email to you, and then we can give our response back to Tristan and our listeners that may have, that we may be able to defend ourselves a little bit here. So
I'm ready to defend.
So it says, "Hi, Dave and Charlie. Did we watch the same episode? ? If you remember, there were a lot of issues. There already were a lot of issue episodes already happening in other shows at the time in the 70s, especially having to do with child abuse. Notably, Hulk guest starring Mariette Hartley played an abusive mom on Emergency whose 8 to 9-year-old son was trying to kill himself because of how badly she was abusing him. The Incredible Hulk, however, decided to show, to its credit, that once in a while child abuse happens not just because a parent or adult or whoever is an outright abusive creep, but because of other issues. But you didn't mention them. The dad had a severe brain neurological disorder which was causing him to make extreme poor decisions with his behavior because of the physical pain he was in, but which was also causing deeply serious biological harm to his brain and behavioral issues which were out of his control. The mom, played by Sally Kirkland, however, had no excuse for her abuse of her son, and David does call her out on it. I really enjoyed how David's scientific and medical expertise were a huge integral part of the plotline because he was able to make a preliminary diagnosis on the dad and get him to the hospital to further tests and surgery. Thanks for reading, Tristan." So that was his commentary around our Child in Need episode, which is Gamma Cast Season 2, Episode 5. So what do you guys say to that, Charlie?
Well, I gotta say, I'm gonna have to rewatch it, but I did not see any of that in the episode. I saw nothing. As I said at the time, there was mention. So, just to give you what I recall was that the father, who of course was going through his own issues, notably he did have PTSD from his own childhood abuse, and perhaps there was some ongoing neurological issues from that. However, I did not note anything that actually suggested that the man had any physical ailment. The most I thought we got was some psychological ailment, general depression, really stemming from a sense of inadequacy and your standard bullying paradigm. I don't recall them suggesting that there was anything deeper, nor that anyone at any time went to the hospital.
Well, no, I mean, at the end, though, that's where the father ended up. He was in the hospital. I just forgot the reason why.
Well, I don't recall. Yeah, I'm saying I don't recall them making a statement of a reason why. And again, if they're going to do that, then I got to say again, what I called out in the episode was that there was this effort to cop out abuse, to both its severity, but at the same time, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna rewatch it. I'm gonna see, and so in a couple episodes from now, I will, after I rewatch it, I will either issue an apology to Tristan, or I will come back with a scathing retort. But I do not recall a mention of any neurological issue with the father. What now? When we see the father having the issue, what we see is that he's watching. The first time we really see his abuse, he's watching the news report about the son who saves his father, and this clearly is dredging up some sort of memories for him and idealizations of what a father-son relationship is supposed to be, and what he felt inadequate in his own father-son relationship with his father, and what he feels inadequate with his son's relationship with him. And of course, he's already like 1 or 2 beers in at this point. So I think the implication was that he was a nice guy until he drank, and then the raging beast that dwelled within him came out. But I do not recall any scientific diagnoses being presented beyond just this. What I'm just going to say was, a bit of a soft sell problem from Banner to the child and the wife about how daddy's not going to go to jail. He's going to go see a doctor to help him with his problems. And at the time I called out the fact, you can always plead yourself down to counseling in these situations, but its effectiveness is directly related to how much you actually want to get cured. As to other...
And what I wanted to make a point to is not necessarily the fact, and I'm glad that you said that you don't remember that part of the episode either, because I don't remember there being anything that was called out by David regarding a medical condition. So I'm glad that you're saying that too. But my approach after reading Tristan's email was, I was like, all right, I understand what could have been happening as to why I might have missed it. Because if you were to understand that when I'm watching the Hulk in my house, I end up having to piecemeal the episode because I'm not able to watch it all in one shot. Normally I get interrupted with the household chaos, and sometimes I'm watching the episode as I'm going off to slumberland, so I could be dozing off and I miss a key point. So in my defense, that could have been there, and I probably just missed it as a key point because of those, the way I watch the episodes. And then something else that our listeners may or may not know is that Charlie and I will watch 2 episodes, and then we podcast both, talk about both episodes. Maybe for it's close to when we watched it to more of a time gap. So at that time that we're recording A Child in Need, we had also recorded right before that Rainbow's End. So sometimes, when you're covering both episodes, there could be some gaps in what it was that we remember from the episodes, and then we're doing our best to try to remember everything that we want to talk about. But that's the reason why there could be some misses.
Yes. Now, what I will say, and this is something that I think is one of the things that happens with the Hulk, is that we do approach it sometimes with a modern knowledge base that is not necessarily present in the original 1978 script. And one thing that could very much be a case is that because of the abuse the father suffered as a young child, he could have had a certain amount of closed head trauma that has led him to these violent outbursts. And in our modern understanding of concussion trauma, that is a very believable bit of headcanon. I just don't know that was available in either the science or the approach to it as it was in 1978. Although, again, if this is something that we both missed, which is entirely possible, that it might have been just a little side one-off bit. Someone suggesting something that that was kind of left-handed and we missed it. It would not be uncommon in this show for them to throw that little bit of science out at us without that you might not notice. I mean, when we saw the episode Life and Death, and we were discussing what is now really advanced gene therapy, but then was still just in the science fiction stage of discussion of how you might approach something.
Yeah, and to your point, we very well obviously could have missed it, and that I could totally see that happening. And in my mind, I could imagine the scene where David is sitting observing the father, and I'm sure at that point, being the scientific medical background that he has, that would be his observation of knowing that there's just something with the father. But if it went, if it got called out later on in the episode, that's where I'm drawing a blank. But
See, to me that seems more like headcanon than actual stated story.
Right. Well, anyway, what I wanted to do is I wanted to read that bit of email that we got.
No, and I appreciate the feedback.
I totally do. And I'm glad that Tristan sent that out. And anybody that's listening that has additional kind of commentary, we'd love to hear it. So please send it to 80sreboot@gmail.com. We'll do like we just did now, where we would read it out and we would give our commentary on that feedback. But I really appreciate Tristan reaching out and giving us that, that additional thoughts on the episode. So thank you.
Yes, and I will rewatch and Tristan expect a heartfelt apology when I see the point that you made that I overlooked.
Some homework for us. We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.